your second choice was book 3, and your third choice was book 5. So now you have 3 different books. Now we go to the next line. So your shopping basket is not empty, so it goes to the next one. It also isn't 1 because we have 3 books in here. We go to the next one. So now this also has no problem. Okay, so our shopping basket is 0 to 4, which means that our first pick was the first book, our second pick was the third book, and our third pick was the fifth book. Count of books array, so it technically tells you for each of the books. For book number 1, you got 1 of them. For book number 3, you got 1. And book number 5, you got 1. And now you want to count the max. You want to see what is the maximum number of each one book that you have. So we expect it to be 1. And after we go over this, our max count is 1. Now we have that array matrix that we want to update based on the information we have. So we're just updating the values until we find an anomaly. Okay, so we went over the code. The value that is supposed to return is 15.2. So that's what our code does for us. But what do we expect from it? What we expect is that we are buying 3 books. Each of them costs 8 euros. And because they are 3 different books, there is a 10% discount. So what is the result of this? 8 times 3 is 24, times 0.9, that will be 21.6. So definitely that's not what we have here. What went wrong that this total became 15.2? I want you to retrace your steps. I'm trying to give you some hints. So you want to have breakpoints on line 19 and 27 and debug your test case again. So array matrix is representative of each of the books. So for example, 0, it tells you what it means is that, so you have 1 of the first book. So your columns, your row 0 would be other than -1. So for example, because you picked the third book, again, you have a value other than -1 for your third book. You didn't have any of the fourth book, so that's why it's -1. And you had the fifth book, that's why it's a value other than -1. Again, you can see that how not having proper names or proper indexing makes a code really hard to understand and follow. So I want you to have a look at this line, line 52. So I'm going to give you a hint and tell you that the problem is in this line. So for example, if the length of your array is 5, then your index goes from 0 to 4. So what you want to do is you either use less than, and you use 5 here, so your row index would go from 0, which is the starting value, to 4, and when it gets to 5, 5 is not less than 5, so you're not going inside your for loop. Or if you're using this -1, then this has to be less than and equal to, because your length is 5, then -1 is 4, so you're going from 0 to 4, which is the right amount, the right range that you want to have. So the better way is to just get rid of this -1. So you're technically not counting one of the values that you had in your arrays. So now you are going over all of the 5 places in your array. So let's stop this and run this code again. I mean, at this point we can just run it if we think that it's gonna pass. If it doesn't, then we can debug again. All right, so we still have a problem. Now the value changed. It's not 15 anymore, so it's giving you 24.3. Let's get back to the code and find another problem. Now why is it 24.3? The problem is here. Look at the numbers that we have here, all these multiplications. So this second number here is the price of the book. And the price of the book is 8 euros. So this 9 is wrong here. So I can make it 8 and try running my test again. And it passes. So we fixed the problem with this test. But let's get back. We have a problem that it just didn't need to be a problem. Why? Is this the best way of actually calculating the discounts and prices? Is there any alternative way? And not necessarily for the whole thing, let's just focus on the price of the book. We just said the price of all of the books is 8 euros. We don't have any other books. We don't have any other prices. We have discounts, which will be applied to the total amount of our shopping cart. So what we can do, choose this value, right-click, refactor, make a variable for it, introduce variable. You have some options. For example, you don't want to do replace all like 8 occurrences of this one value, which is 8, because like first of all, it's not your code. You don't know like there may be other 8s somewhere else. So what we can do for now, let's just do this one value, because we can't be sure, so we can just say price of one book, and this can be constant. And now we can replace it with the values that we know are the price of the book. Let's run this test first, make sure that's still working. All right, so we made some changes. We fixed this test case. Now we want to make sure that it works for everything. Like all the changes that we made is working for the rest of the test cases too. So we see that we had some improvements. We went from 7 failed test cases to 3. So as long as we're not adding more failed test cases, we're good. And we can look at the next one and see how we can fix the next problem. So here, the 3 test cases that are failing, by the name, we can kind of get an idea of which one to approach. Like these 2 are super complicated. This one is 2 sets of 4 instead of 5 and 3. So let's see what the test case is trying to do. So here in your book array, you don't have any of the first book. No, actually, so this says that you have 2 of the first book, 2 of the second book, 2 of the third, 1 of the fourth book, and 1 of the fifth book. So what you expect is to have this value, 2 times 8 times 4, because you have 2 sets of 4 books, and the best discount that you can get is by buying 4 books, 4 different books. So technically it's telling you the best way to calculate the discount is to have 4 books, each one is 8 euros, and then they get a 20% discount. So it would be, it's 32, and times 0.8 is 25.6, times 2 is 51.2. What you're getting is 51.6. So we're going to find what the problem is here. So we debug this test case. All right, so, and we do the same thing. We go line by line. I mean, also, you don't necessarily need to go line by line. If you go just to the next step, wherever you have a breakpoint, it just jumps to that line. You don't need to go line by line. All right, The problem is here. There is something wrong with this line that's making your test fail. Let's see what array matrix does. Array matrix is representative of all the books you have. It technically tells you how many of each book you have. So if you look at your test case, you have 2 of the first book. So here you have 2 of the first book, 2 of the second one, you have it here, 2 of the third one, you have it here, 1 of the fourth one. Here you have 2, but it tells you that your first column is 3, but this one is -1. So it means that you only have 1 sample of the fourth book. Again, logic is not good at all. The way that the code is written is not, it really isn't the best way to do coding, but as long as we understand what's happening, we can find the problem. And we also have 1 of the 5th book, which is here. So what's happening, the way that it represents the number of books you have is by giving you a well, it's not non-zero, it's a value which isn't -1. So for example, for 0, it's representing by, for book 1 is represented by 0, for book 2 is represented by 1, and so on and so forth. And if you don't have it, it gives you -1. Now, having that information and looking at the logic in line 61, can you tell me what the problem is? So when you're saying your array matrix should be greater than 0, technically what you're trying to do is to see whether you have a value which is acceptable as a book, or if it's -1, which means that you haven't picked that book. So the logic doesn't work here because it's telling you greater than 0, but you have to count this too. Because if it's 0, it means that you got, so here we have like 2 of the first book, which are represented by 0. So this has to be -1, which means that if you have any value which is greater than -1, it means that you have picked a book that is represented by numbers 0 to 4. Again, this logic isn't great because you can't accept like 10 or like whatever number which is greater than -1. You have to say what the exact range is, not just one side of the range. But again, work for this example. You just want to fix the problem. We want our test cases to pass, all of them. So we made that change. We made the 0, changed it to -1. Now we can stop debugging and try running this test and see if it works. Oh, that passes. Now, so we fixed this one. Let's see what happened to the rest of the test cases. Well, so now we have 16 passed tests out of 16 test cases that we had. So technically, by solving 2 test cases that were failing, we ended up fixing 5 other ones too. So now this code works. It really isn't a good example of a good code, but it does the job for you, and we could fix the problem for this code using debugging and our test cases.